There is a particular kind of Friday evening that some people consider perfect. The plans have been canceled. The obligation has disappeared. The evening is suddenly, unexpectedly free. And instead of scrambling to fill it, instead of feeling the pull of FOMO or the anxiety of missing out, they feel something that can only be described as relief. Pure, uncomplicated relief. They are home. They do not need to be anywhere else. And that is enough. To people who experience the world differently, this might seem like avoidance, like fear dressed up as preference. But to a psychologist, that Friday evening tells a story about a particular kind of inner life. Rich, self-sufficient, and operating according to psychological principles that most people never fully understand. People who genuinely love staying at home are not the same as people who are afraid to go out. This distinction matters enormously and gets collapsed far too often in popular culture. Fear-based avoidance and genuine preference for home are two entirely different psychological phenomena that can look identical from the outside but feel completely different from the inside. The person who stays home because the world feels threatening is operating from a place of anxiety. The person who stays home because home feels genuinely satisfying is operating from a place of fullness. Understanding the difference and understanding what makes the second kind of person tick reveals something profound about human psychology and the many different ways a human life can be well lived. Psychologists who study introversion and what researchers call restorative environments have found that different people genuinely recover from the demands of daily life in fundamentally different ways. For some people, social engagement is restorative. A party, a gathering, a conversation with strangers, these experiences fill rather than drain. For others, and this group is larger than most people realize, genuine restoration requires solitude, quiet, and familiar surroundings. The home, for these individuals, is not a place of retreat from a better life happening somewhere else. It is the primary environment in which they function at their best, where they think most clearly, feel most like themselves, and experience the deepest sense of well-being. Consider a man named Thomas, a software developer in his mid-30s who genuinely puzzles his colleagues with his social habits. He is warm, articulate, and genuinely interested in other people when he encounters them. But on weekends, he almost never goes out. He cooks elaborate meals in his kitchen. He reads. He works on a small vegetable garden on his balcony. He watches films he has chosen carefully rather than scrolling through options without ever settling on one. When colleagues describe their weekends, the bars, the brunches, the events, he listens with genuine interest but no envy. His weekend, measured by the metrics of visible social activity, looks impoverished. Measured by his own internal experience, it is among the most satisfying time he spends. What Thomas is experiencing, and what people who love staying home often experience, is something psychologists call environmental mastery, a sense of deep familiarity and control over one's immediate surroundings that produces a particular quality of ease impossible to replicate in unfamiliar environments. Home is the one place where everything is arranged according to personal preference, where sensory input is calibrated to individual tolerance, where the social demands are exactly zero unless deliberately chosen. For people whose nervous systems are more sensitive to external stimulation, and research suggests this is a genuine neurological variation, not a personality defect. This level of environmental control is not a luxury. It is a requirement for sustained well-being. The relationship between loving home and creativity is one of the most consistently underappreciated connections in psychology. Solitude, genuine solitude in a familiar and comfortable environment, is one of the most reliable conditions for creative thought. The brain in a social environment is engaged in constant low-level monitoring, tracking social cues, managing impressions, anticipating responses, navigating the complex demands of human interaction. This monitoring is largely unconscious, but it consumes cognitive resources. In solitude, particularly in the familiar solitude of home, this monitoring largely switches off. The mind becomes available for different kinds of work, associative thinking, problem-solving, the kind of slow, meandering mental activity that produces genuine insight. Many of history's most creative individuals were, by contemporary standards, remarkable homebodies. Not because they were antisocial, but because they understood, either consciously or instinctively, that their best thinking happened in conditions of quiet and familiarity. Walk through the home of someone who genuinely loves being there, and you will notice something about how it is arranged. It is not simply a place to sleep and store belongings. It is an environment that has been deliberately constructed to support a particular quality of inner life. The books are not decorative. The kitchen is actually used. The specific chair faces the specific window for a reason. These are not trivial details. They are evidence of a person who has thought carefully, consciously or not, about what conditions allow them to feel most fully themselves. Environmental psychologists who study the relationship between physical space and psychological well-being have found that people who invest in making their home environments genuinely comfortable and personally meaningful report significantly higher levels of life satisfaction than those who treat home as merely functional. The person who loves staying home is, in many cases, someone who has done this work with unusual thoroughness. There is also a profound relationship between loving home and what psychologists call self-determination, the experience of acting from one's own values and preferences rather than from external pressure or social expectation. Modern social culture exerts enormous pressure toward a particular vision of the good life. Busy, social, visible, constantly generating content and experiences to share. The person who chooses to spend their Saturday afternoon reading in their kitchen rather than attending a rooftop party is making a quiet but significant act of self-determination. They are choosing their own experience over the performance of an experience. They are prioritizing actual enjoyment over the appearance of enjoyment. And in a culture that makes this distinction surprisingly difficult, that choice requires a particular kind of psychological stability, a secure enough sense of self that external validation is not required to confirm that one's choices are legitimate. The people who love staying home are not, as a rule, lonely. Loneliness is not about the quantity of social contact, but about the gap between desired and actual connection. A person at a crowded party who feels unseen and unknown is lonely in a way that a person spending a quiet evening alone in their own home, feeling entirely at peace, simply is not. The homebodies of the world have often figured out something that takes others decades to learn, that the quality of one's inner experience is not determined by the volume of one's social life, and that a life lived largely inward is not a lesser life, but simply a different one, with its own particular richness, its own particular pleasures, and its own particular form of human flourishing. What looks like withdrawal from the outside is, from the inside, something much closer to arrival.